this mother...
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. For today's video, thanks to the brilliant team over at Shozy Store, we're going to be checking out the Unique Toys DUMBER, which is their take on a Revenge of the Fallen Mudflap. Now, if you'd like this or any of their previous characters, then make sure to check out that link down below. Now, this guy is only one half of what may just be two of the most hated characters in the history of Transformers. But with that being said, this is still a very solid figure and mostly looks quite close to the actual Chevy tracks, with the exception of one major inaccuracy, that being almost the entire front end of the vehicle. Now, this is for one reason, and really one reason only, that being that instead Unique Toys have decided to prioritise the look of the robot mode, and that can be seen even more as you check out the headlight design. Now, personally, I don't think this is too much of a drawback, but just know that in comparison to the Hasbro version, this is most definitely inferior. But one detail though which I thought was straight up awesome would be that I do believe this is one of the very first Unique Toys figures to integrate actual seats as well as some dashboard detail, which I'm most definitely taking as being a direct throwback to the wicked Human Alliance Mudflap. As we spin this guy here to the underside, he is incredibly tightly compact, which honestly is surprising considering that I think he has by far one of the most straightforward transformations that we've so far seen from this company. When it comes down here to the design of the wheels, these are incredibly clever in the way they've been put together, because in addition to sporting actual rubber tyres, the rims are also die-cast as well as pinned on, so when it does come down to Mudflap burning rubber on that Egyptian battlefield, he should have no issues in doing so. Now, when it comes down to some vehicle mode size comparisons, we are first of all bringing out the OG, the Human Alliance Mudflap, which for the best part of 15 years has been my stand-in for a masterpiece version of this character. Now, whilst the Unique Toys version on its own, not being compared against anything, is still a very strong car, I would be straight up lying to you guys if I said that the Human Alliance version surprisingly didn't absolutely wipe the floor with this third-party offering. Usually it is completely the other way round, but in this case, I think I can most definitely say that old is gold. The Human Alliance version is way closer to match the actual vehicle as seen on screen, which honestly is surprising considering that 9 times out of 10, Unique Toys absolutely knock it out of the park. And despite some of the inaccuracies that have been made to the vehicle mode to maybe result in a slightly better looking robot mode, I'm really hoping that when it does come down to their version of skids, they find a way to make the vehicle mode and the robot mode look as good as this original Human Alliance version. Because if you were to compare this skid not only against the CG render, but to the actual vehicle, to be honest guys, back during 2009, Hasbro were absolutely cooking. The detail, the paint, the engineering, even 15 years on, is absolutely unmatched. And considering that this Mudflap, much like some of their previous releases, is specifically designed to pair alongside the Masterpiece line, here we have the MPM3 Bumblebee. And to be honest, when it does come down to scale, I don't think these here are too far off, but it is most definitely when it comes down to that robot mode, where I think these two in particular make for a pretty banging pairing. Now, when it comes down to this guy's transformation, surprisingly, he is nowhere near as intricate as some of their past releases, which may just be the biggest reason as to why, unfortunately, right now, this guy really isn't blowing any socks off the Bayverse fans. So, for the first step, you are going to grab a hold of this component and detach it exactly like that. You are also going to want to do the same on the opposite side. It is now at this point where you are going to grab a hold of the entire front end and begin to shift this here downwards, which will then almost completely unlock the entire chest unit. Now, the biggest downside to this guy for myself would be how incredibly fiddly he is when it comes down to the transformation. Almost none of the joints are tight, meaning that this will be continuously flopping around, which to be honest guys can create for an incredibly frustrating experience. Once it's all said and done, you are now going to grab a hold of these side doors and make sure to detach these here on both sides. Once that's done, unfortunately it pretty much breaks the spine of the vehicle mode, resulting in yet again another incredibly floppy mess. You are then going to come to the inside where we are going to collapse the seats here inwards, and then you are going to begin to fold these here upwards. You are then going to make sure that you grab a hold of this steering wheel and slide it all the way until it is smack bang in the center. You'll then grab a hold of the dashboard, and this here will slide all of the way up, sandwiching that steering wheel in between what were originally the two seats. You are then going to grab a hold of these side windows and attach these here all the way up, and again guys, make sure to do the same on the opposite side. We are then going to grab a hold of these panels and angle these here outwards, exactly like this. You are then going to grab a hold of the license plate and angle this panel here here all of the way back. We can then take a hold of that plate and slide this here all of the way inside. Once that's all said and done, you are now going to want to spin around by making use out of this back part of the roof. You are then going to grab a hold of this panel, and this will slide all of the way back exactly like this. Now when it comes down here to these side panels, you must make sure that for robot mode, you do slide these here downwards. Once that's done, you can then compress these here inwards exactly like that. And again guys, make sure to do the same for the opposite side. You are then going to make use out of these double hinge joints, grab a hold of these sections and compress these here inwards until eventually they should be looking exactly like that. For one final touch, when it comes here to this central torso, we are now going to grab a hold of this back panel and simply angle it here upwards. You are then going to grab a hold of the legs of Mudflap, and these will split directly down the middle. You are then going to grab a hold of this where the knee joint is located and begin extending here downwards exactly like that. You are then going to take a hold of the base of the foot and spin this here around and then collapse this here against the tyre. You are then going to take the front part of the foot and spin this here all the way around. To finish off this guy's leg design, we are then going to make use out of these double hinge joints where we are going to take this component and thread it all the way around to the front. You are then going to grab a hold of this piece and angle it here backwards until eventually this tab right here will very nicely slide into one of those cutouts. Again guys, do all of the same steps for the opposite side until eventually Mudflap's legs should be looking exactly like this. You are then going to grab a hold of the waist joint and spin this here all the way around to the front, which speaking of, we are now going to take a hold of these indicator lights and begin to angle these here downwards. We are now going to take these front fenders and you are going to want to extend these here outwards like that. You are then going to want to flip these here forwards because what you are now going to do is making use out of this joint, we are going to try to pop out this headlight. So just wiggle this here until eventually this will detach. My recommendation to you guys would be to then angle this here upwards just to really lock that into place, because these definitely can become incredibly frustrating, especially if they do revert back to their original vehicle mode positions. Once the second side is transformed, you can now grab a hold of this guy's neck and spin this here all the way around and angle this here downwards like that. You are then going to flip here to the underside of Mudflap, where we are now going to grab a hold of the forearms and first of all separate those, and then second of all come up here to the shoulders and also detach that tab and slot exactly like this. Now buried beneath is an additional component that we will require in order to lock the torso into place, so definitely make sure that you fully extend that out, because we are now going to grab a hold of these armatures and we are going to begin to shift this joint here upwards and then compress the tyre here inwards, just like that. Again guys, make sure to do the same for the opposite side. We are now going to try our best to combine both halves, so these slots should then attach into those tabs, although unfortunately they don't actually click into place, so yet again really do have a tendency to become very easily detached. So angle this here upwards until eventually the tabs and the slots are now united. We are then going to take a hold of the entire chest unit and slide this here downwards. You are then going to take a hold of the neck and push this here down and then slide this here forwards to try your best to lock this into place. We are then going to take this tab and slide it into that slot. So angle this here backwards, snap that section there into place. You are then going to grab a hold of this piece, slide this here down, and this should then very nicely slide into the underside of this guy's arm. And again guys, make sure to do the same for the opposite side. So angle this panel here back and slide this here all the way to the underside. We are then going to take these components and angle these here upwards on both sides. The forearm will then spin around at the bicep, and we'll also do the same when it comes to the second side. For the final step, you are then going to grab a hold of the shoulders and just slightly slide these here outwards. And bang! Now we have Mudflap fully transformed, and this is a proper good looking robot mode. He also appears to be incredibly close to how he did originally appear in the movie. So as we check out the details, the head sculpt I think is looking sick. This is looking to be incredibly close to the actual CG design, and when it does come down here to this chest piece, personally I really like how they've kind of crumpled this up to give off a slightly more complex look. Although despite some of the drawbacks that we did see when it came around to that vehicle mode, in all honesty guys, I can't say that I do prefer this design in comparison to that Human Alliance version. But as we spin down here to the forearms and the legs, this guy's packing an incredibly solid design, especially when it comes down to the placement of these side wheels. Now easily one of the biggest improvements he does have in comparison to that original Hasbro version would be how they were able to minimize the backpack. For the most part, this guy has no kibble on his design at all, which I think is seriously impressive. Now considering that this guy is a Unique Toys release and they are renowned for packing in as much detail into the back of their figures as they are usually from the front, hand. It is kind of a shame, in all honesty, not to see this backpack have any kind of spinal detail, but to be honest guys, I still think this is a very solid take on this Mudflap design, and for those of you who don't currently own the Human Alliance version, due to its absolute insane aftermarket price, as of right now, I really do think that not only is this one of the better, but also one of the more affordable alternatives in getting this character into your collection, because unfortunately I just don't believe that Hasbro nor Takara Tomy are ever likely to approach the twins again. When it comes down to weaponry, this guy's packing 2 handheld pistols, which I don't believe we ever actually see him use in the movie, although to be honest guys, the integration is simply nuts. You have to take the thumb, reverse it around to the back of the hand, which personally I think looks straight up ridiculous. Checking out this guy's posability, first of all we have to see what those door wings are packing. So sadly, these can only be brought forwards as well as backwards. Unlike the movie, these are unable to be hinged upwards, which for Unique Toys yet again I think is a pretty big miss. When it comes down here to the head, both this and the ears are on ball joints, so you can most definitely get super expressive with that. The shoulders are able to be brought forwards as well as backwards. They are also packing ratchet joints when it comes to the outwards range. That is pretty damn supreme. Now in addition to the bicep cut, there is also an upper elbow cut, which allows for a pretty decent rotation, and then when it comes down here to the elbow, this can crunch all the way into 90. Now this hand in particular I think is simply badass, because in addition to being able to be spun left to right as well as crunched inwards and outwards, this guy's sporting individual finger articulation. So when it comes down to Mudflap flipping off the Decepticons on the battlefield, he should have no issues in doing so. The waist is then able to be spun all the way around, which is pretty awesome. The hips, in addition to being able to be kicked forwards as well as also kicked backwards, can then also kick out to the side on these pretty sweet ratchet joints. There is then a thigh swivel as well as a ratcheted knee bend, and when it comes down here to the ankle, in addition to rocking side to side, which by the way guys reveals some pretty decent base detail, the front part of the toe can also be hinged upwards. So overall, when it does come down to posability, he is actually incredibly dynamic. But as I'm sure you guys all know by now, to see what Mudflap is truly capable of, now let's put him through the pose test. Flying through some comparisons, first of all we are bringing out the Human Alliance Mudflap. Now this guy's is tough, because on one hand, the Unique Toys version is arguably better when it comes down to functionality. Due to it no longer having a huge ass backpack, you are able to get this version into so many dynamic poses. But with that being said, visually, I still think the Human Alliance version absolutely reigns supreme. So I think I'll put it this way. For those of you who don't own the Human Alliance version and are after a slightly more affordable alternative, then definitely the Unique Toys version I think is worth checking out. But if you do already own this version, then to be honest guys, I would absolutely recommend to stick with it, because even after 15 years, it still appears to be an absolute banger. Here is how he stacks up against his brother from another mother. We have the Human Alliance Skids. So for those of you who perhaps don't plan in picking up the Unique Toys version, to be honest, I still think these scale incredibly well. Next up, here is the MPM3 Bumblebee, and I actually think the scale between these two works an absolute treat, especially if you were to judge by what we did see in the movie. Then finally, we are rounding off with the absolute GOAT of the live action movie designs, the MPM4 Optimus Prime. So, wrapping up on this review for the Unique Toys Dumber. Personally guys, I really do think this figure right here is kind of a mixed bag, because on one hand, as of right now, this is easily not only the most affordable, but arguably one of the best Mudflaps we've so far seen. But then on the other hand, in comparison to the original 2009 Human Alliance figure, as well as some of those original Unique Toys entries, I can't help but feel as if though he does fall kind of short. It is very rare for the Hasbro version to outdo the third party, and unfortunately that is definitely something which I've found when it comes down to this guy, especially in terms of the vehicle mode. Now as mentioned previously, personally the lack of paint up front really isn't a big deal to myself, but considering that that was something that we did see way back during 2009, it is a shame that Unique Toys never found the way to make it work here. When it does come down to the transformation, I think for the most part it is fairly straightforward. The biggest downside I have would be just how incredibly floppy he becomes. It does create for an incredibly frustrating experience, especially when you just want to begin work on the bottom and the top half continuously continuously begins flopping about, but when it does come down to that robot mode, I think that is easily the best form this guy has. For the most part, I really don't have any issues at all, and when it comes down to that backpack, it most definitely is a big improvement in comparison to that Hasbro version. So I'll put it this way, if you already own the Human Alliance version and you aren't too keen on replacing it anytime soon, then you can most definitely give this guy a miss. Although, if you don't own the Human Alliance version and always have wanted to, then this Unique Toys version, to be honest guys, I think is a pretty solid stand-in. I would love to get your guys' thoughts on this Unique Toys Dumber down in the comment section below. For those of you looking to pick this up, be sure to check out the link in the description box. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and until my next video, transform and roll out!